Table for One, episode 28, Aeon's End, with designer Kevin Riley. Hey everybody, welcome back to Table for One. This is episode 28. This is Anthony, once again with Jason.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
All right, and we have another special episode for you this week. We have Kevin Riley, designer of Aeon's End, with us.
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing good, man. Thanks for coming on. I know you have a Kickstarter running right now. You're probably a busy guy. But, you know, we talked about your game a little bit in the past, and we kind of wanted to dive in a little bit on that.
Cool. Yeah, I've been, I feel like just answering questions nonstop for a week. But it's been good. I'm really happy with how it's going.
That's awesome, though. You got all those people so psyched for the game, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we, last year we had a Kickstarter and we got 189,000 for our month-long campaign, and we're a week in and we've already broken 200,000. So it's a really big step up. I'm really excited to see how far we go.
That's awesome.
I definitely think let's just jump right into it. So Aeon's End, I guess we could just give the quick and dirty description. It's a cooperative deck building game. And it works like a lot of deck builders that you know, 5 cards, you start with 5 very simple cards of a deck of 10, and you're buying cards from a market, and the cards that you get will improve your buying capacity, will improve your attack power, basically make you better. And you're slowly trying to whittle away at this boss, and the boss is attacking you. The boss is attacking the city that your characters are defending, so kind of splitting the attacks, and the boss is sending out all these nasty effects and minions. So you're slowly building up. The boss is also building up at the same time. And eventually, it's a win-or-lose scenario. It's not like a points-based thing. You either beat the boss or you don't. So speaking of like why this Kickstarter is kind of hitting so hard, as the last one did well, this one is just blowing it away. I think last time we're looking at this game going, okay, I've seen this before. Like, I've seen cooperative deck builders. I've seen Shadowrun Crossfire. I've seen, Dominion is also, the original deck builder. I've seen Legendary. Should I back this? Is this going to be that different? And obviously the people are voting with their whatever they click their mouse, whatever finger they click their mouse with, they're saying, yes, this is different. So tell me a little bit about that process, like, designing Aeon's End and differentiating it from these other games in this genre.
The hardest part about pitching Aeon's End was, what's different about Aeon's End? Like, my biggest argument is just it's designed really well. Like, everything is smooth. We iron out a lot of the wrinkles that other games have, and we create this very coherent, compelling experience. And it's really not something you can convey in a 10, 20, 30-minute elevator pitch. It's not something you can really convey on a Kickstarter page. You have to play the game to really understand what Aeon's End is doing differently from other deck builders and other co-op games.
So taking a step back, actually, this is your first game, like first board game, right?
Yeah, it's my first any game thing.
How did you make that transition? What inspired you to make that transition? Is there something, and also attached to that, was there something about being that deep in a video game that really helped you kind of design so tight of a system this time?
The biggest thing is, my whole life I kind of had a hobby for design. When I played StarCraft 1, I made custom maps. I made some small custom maps in Warcraft 3 and in StarCraft 2. But I never made anything big enough or finished enough to be, a retail product, something you could sell to people. And as far as what did StarCraft do? StarCraft really taught me a lot about work ethic. It taught me a lot about what it takes to make something good. And it taught me a lot about, basically, if you leave something to chance, you're deciding that you want to fail in that area. That's how the world works. Things are almost always not going to work if you do not guarantee that they do work. And so Aeon's End War Eternal saw hundreds, thousands of games, both in-house as well as with the blind playtesters, so that we could literally put multiple eyes on every single part of this game multiple times. And that's the only way that we were able to really guarantee such a high level of quality of play.
Mhm. Okay, so like this does remind me of a very like finely tuned engine in a sense. Could you tell us a little bit, kind of getting under the hood of what about those some previous deck builders that you wanted to address with this design?
Sure. So tracking is one of the biggest ones. And when I say tracking, basically it's a feature in a game that requires you to remember that it's there in order to use it correctly. And a lot of games really go overboard on tracking, and they create a big mental exercise. The game is more about managing all the passive and global effects that are occurring than it is about having a good strategy or playing the game, really. And Aeon's End doesn't have tracking, except in very, very specific exceptions. We make sure that anytime we make a decision that makes the game less accessible, we do it for a really good reason. Aeon's End has a pretty long setup time, has a pretty long teardown time, but those things really contribute. They're a part of what allows us to make the game so rich and so complicated and so interesting. Not complicated, so deep, I guess. And so the few places where we have tracking mechanics, we've tested those mechanics multiple times, and we decided, yes, this is worth breaking this design philosophy because this mechanism is so incredibly cool that it needs to be there. And some games just kind of go crazy. There are, 6-10 cards out in play, and half of them do something whenever you do blah, half of them do something whenever you do this other blah, and it's very hard to actually figure out or even play the game correctly. And Aeon's End we just don't do that. We don't have tracking.
So I'm thinking of this game is often called in the forums as Sentinels of the Multiverse 2.0 because it's different because it is a deck builder. Sentinels is not, but you have heroes, you have a villain, and you're going back and forth and doing your thing. So Sentinels, it's a great game, but it has that. It has 4 or 5 things going on. There's damage reduction 1 here. There's every time this happens, that happens there. Is that kind of thing what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So we basically have a rule that is nothing, no cards, nothing has an effect unless you are directly interacting with it. And so there's a number of minions that do have like a when you attack this, do something, but there's nothing that's like whenever you spend Aether, do something, or whenever you cast a spell, do something, because those create tracking and they create headaches. They're hard to manage.
So like I know there's minions that like you hit him and all damage is reduced to 1 as
Sure.
opposed to -1 damage per hit.
Right.
So you just like you hit him and it's 1 and you're good to go, as opposed to like, okay, 10 -1, I have this in.
Your example is more like let's reduce arithmetic that the players have to do, which is a good thing, and we try and avoid it as much as possible. But what I'm talking about is, let's say that minion Cauterizer said whenever a player casts a spell, that spell deals 1 less damage. And it doesn't matter what you're casting that spell at, it just does 1 less damage. That is a tracking issue, because now you have to know and remember what Cauterizer is doing, even when you're not attacking Cauterizer. So your eyes won't necessarily be on Cauterizer, but its effect is still resolving. And that's the kind of tracking that we avoid in Aeon's End.
So let's get a little bit for people who are still kind of getting used to Aeon's End and getting to know it a little bit, breaking down what the different elements are. So like on the player end, you've set up a system where it's like cock and load, right? So you have these breaches in front of you, and the breaches are basically spell slots. And then you play the card on the breach, and then the next turn you can fire it off. And then there's all sorts of ways in which you can manipulate that, but that's the basic thing that you do. And then the other player, some of the other player things that you've done is there's no shuffling with the deck. You put your stuff in a discard pile, you flip the discard pile over, which is great because you're not shuffling and there's less need to sleeve cards
Yep.
and all that kind of stuff. So I'm guessing like those two are very intentional decisions to create a sense of tactics.
Right. So the no shuffling, we wanted to give players increased control over how the deck building is going to function. One thing is it's neat just because it doesn't exist, but it's also neat because it allows you to really do interesting things with your deck. And we expanded on that in War Eternal. There are more cards that take advantage or allow you to really plan out how your deck is working.
Could you give us an example?
Yeah, so there's a new spell that's well prepped. At the start of your casting phase, you reveal the top card of your deck, and you can either destroy it or put it back. And so that card, in order to use it most effectively, you want it to always be revealing cards that you want to destroy. But because you are just prepping it and you're not going to be revealing cards until a little bit later, it requires a little bit of planning to actually use to its maximum efficiency.
Do you want to put that spells in a discard pile in a certain order so that it kind of, you prep it, and then you're not like the next turn you don't have like 5 crystals. You actually get the spells that you or whatever. I'm not describing it well, but
Sure.
You want to be able to let's say it's like a trashing mechanism. You want to make sure that the next card that comes up is a card that you can trash or something like that.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And we also wanted to, along with the no shuffling, it's also really nice because it keeps the gameplay going at a very nice pace. Shuffling is slow. A lot of people, I say this a lot, shuffling is slow, and some people kind of roll their eyes at me like, well, how slow could shuffling really be? It's like, well, it's slow enough. And it's not in Aeon's End, so the game is faster. How much faster? I don't know. It depends. But some of the other design decisions we made actually are what would contribute most to keeping the game smooth. No shuffling is just a part of that.
Mm-hmm. And then, so then the next part that it seemed like there was a lot of like design attention to was how the market works and how like just buying and selling interaction works. So it's not a lot of cards. Like it's 9 cards, but the stacks are small. Like in Dominion,
Right.
You actually have pretty big fat stacks. So when you're buying cards, like I guess most of my games at Dominion, people look at the market, they identify, okay, that this combo card is the best, and then those piles just disappear, and everyone's kind of playing the same depending on how cards come out of their pile or whatever it is. But it seems like with this small market, you wanted to encourage like teamwork and specialization. So like, okay, you get the powerful spells, I'll get some relics to support you. I'm guessing that was also an intentional choice of yours.
Yeah, we tested a whole bunch of different sizes and for markets and number of copies of cards. And basically what we found was if there are too many copies of the right cards, then people can kind of do the same strategy. And we wanted to encourage more cooperation, more teamwork, and we wanted to make sure that people were really planning things out. And so now if 2 people go for the same strategy, there won't be enough cards in the supply to do it usually. And that again, like necessitates that people are talking to each other and making sure that I'm not doing the same strategy you are. As far as the number of different types of cards, we just kind of observed that this game didn't need a big market because there are so many ways you can spend your economy. You can spend them to open your breaches, you can spend them on charges, you can get rid of powers, and a lot of those are repeatable things. You can use your ability a whole bunch of times. And so it didn't seem like we needed a really big market, and whenever possible, we try and make things smaller. We make them as small as possible to achieve the effect that we want, keep it as simple as possible, and that contributes to just making the game a little more playable, a little more accessible, reduce setup and teardown, stuff like that.
And I also like at the end, like near when you get to the end of the game and you're kind of happy with your deck, I like that you still have things to do with that currency. So you could still charge up your thing. You still spend it to, let's say the boss has a power out and you need like 8 ether to get rid of it. You have that 8 ether. You can basically kind of settle and say, okay, my deck is good now, and I still have stuff to buy. Where in a lot of other deck builders, you might get extra currency, and it's like, I don't want to fatten my deck.
Right.
You mentioned a lot of things, the ideal idea of how you want it to work, and then streamlining down from there. Like, was there anything in particular that you found particularly challenging to streamline down, or that took a lot of extra testing or iterations to get to where you wanted it to be?
Almost everything took a lot of iterations. I don't know. There's very few things were easy to come by. We spent a lot of time figuring out how the breaches should work. You look at the breaches and they're one of the things that new players tend to struggle with initially. And once they're explained, it's like, oh yeah, I get it. That makes sense. The numbers all seem about what you would expect and everything kind of works. And to get from the initial idea of like, let's have breaches to this is how they should work, and these are the specific numbers, and this is the bonus. That was a huge, huge process. The game actually started as a competitive game. Turning it into a cooperative game was also that was like several months of development.
What facilitated that?
Yeah, so I pitched the game to a bunch of companies at Origins 2 years ago, and I didn't get much follow-up except from Action Phase. And a month or two went by, and I was kind of going back and forth with Action Phase, and they gave me the ultimatum. It was like a competitive game like this that's hard and doesn't have much randomness, doesn't have much luck, doesn't really fit with our line. But if it was cooperative, then we might have a new discussion to talk about. And so basically, I made it cooperative so that I could actually get a game published, and that's really what started it.
I guess I'm having an issue with the imagining this game as a competitive game. Was there no main boss? Was it just mages against each other?
Right. So at that point, there weren't actually unique mages. Just everybody's setup started the same 4 breaches. There were no abilities, and each player had 70 life or 50 or something, and then you just go until you kill your opponent.
The cooperative, you needed to introduce that boss element in order to make it cooperative.
Yeah, I mean, I needed something that the players were doing together, and the boss seemed... I don't really know... When they told me to make it cooperative, there wasn't like a... I don't know, I don't really remember what happened. It was kind of just like, all right, let's just make it cooperative and like throw ideas at the wall, because it was such a big thing to attach to this game, to integrate into what it already was, that we tried a whole bunch of different implementations before we settled on the current one for how the bosses work. An early version, the boss sheet didn't have a deck. It was just a sheet with like 6 effects and a tier 1 and a tier 2 version. And every time it was the boss turn, he just did an effect, and then he cycled to the next one. And when he did all of the effects in his tier 1 twice, he went to his tier 2. That was like, I think, the first implementation that we ever tried.
And then eventually, like, the deck evolved from that, but I just find that really fascinating. That this, like, I would never have known that this started as a competitive game. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, the sheet idea was too predictable. It was not varied enough. We wanted to move to something that would lend the game additional replayability. So we started experimenting with the deck. And basically the reason Unleash is in the game is because we didn't want to have to make a deck for every single boss. We thought it'd be too time consuming, too difficult, and not enough reward. So we ended up making this Unleash keyword, which each nemesis uses differently, and that allowed us to reuse a lot of the cards while still actually creating fresh and varied experiences.
All right. Well, speaking of fresh and varied experiences, here we go with a whole new standalone expansion that's currently doing really well on Kickstarter. Tell me a little bit about, I read an article that there's this linking mechanic you've introduced. Was this kind of a play area for that kind of innovation and design?
Yeah. So I don't know how familiar you are with video games, but Blizzard is by far my favorite company to look to in terms of design. They just make great products. Basically, every game that Blizzard touches, they put their own spin on it, and they're not afraid to innovate. And that's the thing that I really wanted to make sure we did in War Eternal, is we are not afraid to push the boundaries of this game and do whatever testing it needs to make those boundaries make sense. And so Link was one example of a way, although to be fair, Link was maybe one of the more minor things that we did. For those of you who don't know, Link is 2 spells with Link can be prepped to the same breach, whereas normally you can only prep 1 spell to a breach. And that opens a lot of new strategic possibilities and different ways of playing. All the new nemesis, the new mages, we really tried to push the boundaries of what the Aeon's End engine can do. Just like in the base game of Aeon's End, every nemesis is different. There are no nemesis that we've made that will feel... Some of them are similar, like we have 2 nemesis that make minions, but there are none that feel similar when you play them. They all provide a very different a different strategy, a different approach. What's good against one will be bad against another, that type of thing. And that continues into War Eternal.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that War Eternal does, and I definitely think this has helped the Kickstarter as well, and this has nothing to do with Kevin Riley, the designer. A lot of people had issues with the first print run component quality. So the breaches were just cardstock, and the cards were a little, they weren't as nice as some other decks and whatever it is. Like, you didn't have to shuffle them, but if you did have to shuffle them, you might have run into a couple of problems. It seems like they really put a lot of effort into redoing the graphic design, redoing some of the tokens. You get the upgrade pack. How involved were you? Did you kind of agree with that criticism, or at least hear from the community? And how involved were you in addressing some of that?
So, as a longtime gamer, I have a very good understanding of what it feels like to be on the other side. This is the first time I've really been on the designer side. For my whole life, I've been the gamer side. And so I check Board Game Geek, I check the Kickstarter, I check Reddit, and I see what people are saying. And for me, I don't really care what the theme of a game is. I don't really care what the flavor text is. I don't really care what the story is. I play games for strategy and deep decision making and a challenge and engaging gameplay. But I understand that there are lots of people, the majority of people, who don't feel that way. The majority of people want a theme. They want to buy a game that looks nice and feels nice. And we identified that this was an issue, and kind of as a whole group, everyone at the team decided, in order to really give Aeon's End the best chance it has, the best chance possible, we need to fix these issues. And that's one of the big things going into War Eternal. That's one of the big changes that we're making, is everything's going to be nicer. All of the components, we're upgrading the quality of things. We're making some stuff thicker. The breaches are going to be tokens. I think we unlocked that stretch goal. And so, yeah, we're very aware, and it's a very conscious decision. We really believe in what Aeon's End is, the engine, the gameplay that we've made so far, and we feel like the biggest thing holding it back was the component issues. Once those are fixed, we really expect this game to take off even more than it has.
So Action Phase really kind of embraced you in that role. That's not always true of a company. I know Action Phase is a little bit smaller, so they can, it's a little bit more likely to happen. But they've really, it sounds like you're kind of on board with every aspect of the game, from design to production and all that stuff.
That gives me too much credit. I provide an opinion, and I direct them to feedback that we receive, but I'm not involved in art, the manufacturing, production, distribution, stuff like that. The other thing is Action Phase was acquired by Indie Board and Card last year, and so we've got a much bigger kind of support network to make some of these changes possible that maybe the smaller company of Action Phase would have had more trouble with.
Cool. Do you have anything else to contribute about Aeon's End that we should know, or about the Kickstarter, about the game itself?
I don't know. Just check us out. We've got a lot more stretch goals to unlock, a lot more of things that we want to show to people, more story, more theme, more just everything. I'm just really, really excited that I got a chance to make more of the game that I enjoy so much. And thank you for having me on the show. This was fun.
Yeah. Really appreciate it, Kevin, for coming on and kind of giving us kind of a run through of what it looks like to put a game like this together, especially one that's so meticulously crafted, because there's playing the game. We had a big conversation about this actually when we talked about it, in comparing this to some of those other ones. You can tell how carefully tuned a lot of these things are, and it is appreciated. It is really cool. So thanks for that, and thanks for coming on and talking about it.
Cool.
So but actually, before you go, do you have other games in the hopper?
We are, me and my girlfriend, she was a big part of designing Aeon's End, and she kind of helps on and off depending on how busy she is with her program at the university. But we've been working on 2 smaller games that are not good enough to talk about, but maybe you'll see them eventually.
Mm-hmm. So this is not it. We have not heard the last of Kevin Riley, original game designer. So we're
Yeah, well, I
stuff.
mean, the more zeros you see on the Kickstarter, the more likely it is that we're just going to make more stuff for Amazon too. So there's definitely that possibility as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And best of luck with the rest of the Kickstarter.
Thanks. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin.
All right, that's going to be everything for this week's episode. Thank you again to Kevin for coming on. It was really cool talking about Aeon's End and War Eternal, which is on Kickstarter right now. So make sure you guys go check that out if you are interested in anything we just talked about. In the meantime, swing on by our website at boardgamersanonymous.com, as well as our Facebook page, Twitter account at BGA Podcast, and our Board Game Geek Guild 1735. Find all the content from all the weeks up on all those things. Also, if you missed out on it, we had a big contest last month for the board game bracket that we run every year. So make sure you are on our newsletter. That's where we announce that, and make sure you can, join those contests. There are about 200 people entered, and you could have been one of them. Had a chance to win. So definitely get on that, and have a chance of winning the next time we have a contest here, coming one up, hopefully real soon. But until next week, that is going to be everything, and we'll save you a seat at this table for one.
Later, everybody.